Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Wednesday, November 26, 2025. And if at any point you like the content of this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for helping this channel expand. Anyway, I heard a comment that was so outlandish that I thought I should bring the report to you. Here is France 24, which is, of course, official or state news agency masquerading as a objective, independent news source, and they are putting out this narrative that Steve Witkoff is basically a Russian spy, a Russian stooge, who simply parrots Russian talking points, and they seem to have found the proof in a recent recording. So, as you may be familiar with the whole process of how President Trump has been approaching the negotiations. First he had Kellogg, and Kellogg was the main man, but he basically took the Ukrainian position and wasn't capable of finding an agreeable median point between Russia and Ukraine. So the Russians basically rejected his offensive discourse, which many times spoke very poorly of the Russians and did not take into account anything that they had said about the purpose of the special military operation. Anyway, Kellogg wasn't getting anywhere, so then Trump brought in Witkoff, and the purpose of Steve Witkoff, he's not a diplomat, he's not a politician, he's a real estate guy. So the whole purpose of Steve Witkoff, as we're being presented, is that he's going to understand the Russian position so that in discussions with the Trump team, they could find a point of juncture between the Ukrainian points and the Russian points. So you had on the one side, you had Kellogg, and the other side, you had Witkoff. So obviously, if his job is to understand the Russian position, to be able to take that point and then find a median point, then he needs to understand it. So, but now, because of the various attempts that have gone on to try to find a new point at which to crack the nut of the peace deal, Steve Witkoff has been meeting, I guess, in private with Russian representatives, low level, not really the diplomatic team, in order to continue the discussion. But anyway, this assignment, which was given to him by President Trump, of understanding the Russian position to be able to better understand how to crack the nut of finding a median point between Russia and Ukraine, seems to the Europeans as a betrayal, and as if he is some sort of Russian stooge, just repeating Russian talking points. So we had this outlandish report here from France 24. So we have Ukrainians have, for a very long time, Ukrainians have suspected that Steve Witkoff was working for the Russians. So basically, this is the point of the video of France 24. And you can infer from that they also are stating that President Trump is really working for Russia, really working for Russian interests. So Witkoff is basically the go-to guy to move forward the Russian interests. So anyway, here is some content from this report. So we have in the background, well, this fellow is usually in Kiev, now he's in Paris. Not too sure why he just doesn't stay in Kiev. But anyway, and why? What's the significance of reporting from Paris? from a Paris street if the report is supposed to be regarding Ukraine or things going on in Kiev. So anyway, this is a totally odd thing to do. They could have just put him in a studio and you wouldn't know where he would be reporting from. But anyway, here he is on the street in Paris. Anyway, let's listen to what this reporter has to say about the whole Witkoff. You could call it the Witkoff efforts to move forward the peace plan. So here we go.
Well, to Ukrainians, perhaps they're not so much of a revelation as to other people who haven't been watching this so closely, because for a very long time, Ukrainians have suspected that Steve Witkoff was working for the Russians. Every time he meets with Vladimir Putin, he seems to come away repeating Russian narratives. So some people thought that he was quite deliberately working for the Russians. Others perhaps thought that he was just what is known as a useful idiot, with the emphasis very firmly on the idiot part. The man is incapable of remembering the names of the Ukrainian regions that he thinks Ukraine should give up. In a sense, what is revealed in this phone call is that if people who, some of them do.
So anyway, we go on further in this report. I'll leave a link to this below. So anyway, they're calling him a Russian stooge or a useful idiot, with emphasis on idiot. So you can see the frustration that is taking place in the French government. They've done everything to try to get the Trump administration to mimic the attitude of the Biden administration. And the Biden administration always spoke in an extremely negative tone about the Russians and about their interests and about their national security. So all those the important points to the Russians were completely ignored. The history of how we got into this conflict in the first place was completely ignored. And the Biden administration simply was ramping up more and more war efforts to support Ukraine, with the eventual conclusion, if they would continue that, there would be a direct military conflict between Russia and the United States. So in entered President Trump, and he began stating, it's not my war, it's Biden's war, it's someone else's war. I'm just here to try to solve it. So anyway, he began really on the wrong foot with Kellogg, because Kellogg really wasn't a mediator. He's a general with very rigid views on Russia, made him incapable of thinking outside the box and looking for commonalities to reach a peace deal. And in entered Witkoff to try to further the dialogue and look for points of convergence. So this bothered the Europeans to no end, especially the French, who apparently have lost hundreds of soldiers in Ukraine operating their French equipment, and are looking to get revenge on the Russians, looking to deliver Russia a strategic defeat, and thinking that President Trump would enter into this little game. And since he doesn't, he's therefore a Russian agent, a Russian stooge. And we have Witkoff, who's doing a fantastic job, considering he's not a politician, he's not a statesman, he's not a negotiator, he's a real estate guy, and he came in and brought a lot of he brought a bridge to to try to be able to communicate with the Russians and try to find some way forward. Biden administration had completely burned every bridge known to man between the two governments, and so Witkoff was, so to speak, a fresh breath of air within the scope of negotiations. So, very warm personality, someone who tries to, um, from real estate, you're representing your side, but you have to be able to understand the other side and to be able to negotiate with that. At least you can't just hammer on your side, the price or the conditions or the terms. In real estate, you have to be very flexible. You have to, in a certain sense, create these win-win scenarios. And this is what is totally unacceptable to the Europeans and the French, who've already lost one war with Russia. They lost basically 90% of their soldiers, who died either because of disease or frozen to death or wounds in Russia, and came out basically with a ragtag group of survivors and have been looking to avenge those French losses ever since. Now seem to have the opportunity, but since President Trump won't collaborate with them, won't see their way of thinking, which is basically an imperialistic, colonialist modus operandi. So since he is not favoring their modus operandi, then anything that President Trump does or Witkoff does is, basically serving the Kremlin. So all this is just completely over the top. I'm sure that at some point France 24 will make some sort of apology video. They're essentially calling him an idiot, a stooge, a spy. So they'll, someone will probably call this Spygate or something like that. All the Russian spy, all the Trump, Russian operatives, endangering national security and the security of NATO and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, but you can see the panic and the disgust of the Europeans toward the Trump administration, and even the 28 points which was presented to us did not represent Russian interests. In just about every one of those points, the Russians lost. In order to agree to that, they would have to make significant concessions. So it wasn't simply Russian talking points. And but Steve Witkoff, his job is to understand what is the Russian point of view, what are they trying to achieve, because it's simple common sense. If you're negotiating with somebody and you know what they're trying to achieve and where they're coming from, you can certainly negotiate with them a lot better. And the Europeans have been terrible at anything close to diplomacy or negotiations, and comes along Steve Witkoff. He shines brightly above their very conceited and self-centered way of acting, and then they call him a Russian stooge, a Kremlin employee, an idiot. So I think this is not going to go very far, but you can see what the Europeans are doing, trying to stir up trouble for Steve Witkoff, and basically inferring from that President Trump really is a Kremlin stooge working for Putin, working overtime to make sure Putin wins, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I just wanted to bring you this quick report and thought that it was interesting that now they're going after the juggler in the Trump administration to try to cut off any possibility of dialogue with the Russians. And do I think they'll be successful or not? Well, I think that more Europeans will get on this bandwagon because they're coming up against, their maximalist efforts on behalf of Ukraine have shown no fruit up until now, and certainly it'll only lead to additional frustration and panic in the future as Russia advances along the front line. So anyway, if you like this video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you supporting this channel and helping it to grow, and I look forward to seeing you back for another video. Have a very happy Thanksgiving and safe travels. Bye bye.